I was driving home after a long night of work. It was late, and I preferred the backroads. The winding highway was quiet, with trees standing close to the road. It felt peaceful, maybe too peaceful. I sensed something was off, but I brushed it aside. I've thought about that night a lot. I slowed down when I saw a man by the roadside. He wore a flannel shirt and looked harmless enough. I rolled down my window. "Need a ride?" I asked. He smiled and nodded as he climbed in. We talked about photography spots around the area, but then he shared something that made me uncomfortable. He mentioned strange sounds coming from the woods at night. He spoke about people disappearing in that part of the forest. I tried to keep my focus on the road, but his words haunted me. I dropped him off, but even then, an inexplicable chill settled over me. As I drove on, the peaceful vibe felt heavier. The trees loomed closer. My heart raced, and I started looking more carefully at the woods. The next night, I picked up a woman. She told me about her friend who vanished last summer while hiking. The weight of her story pressed down on me. It felt like every hitchhiker I picked up had a tale that wound deeper into the dark woods. Then there was a man who claimed he heard voices calling him from the trees. His eyes were wide, and I could see he was scared. Each encounter left a mark on my mind, like I was driving further into a waking nightmare. I saw strange symbols carved into trees, shapes I couldn't quite remember. They made me uneasy. I wondered if they had anything to do with the stories I was hearing. One night, I picked up a young man. As soon as he got in, he started laughing, but it didn't sound right. When he got serious, his eyes turned wild. He whispered about the woods holding a secret. I felt cold, like someone had thrown ice water over me. I asked what he meant, but he just smiled. When I dropped him off, he turned to look at me, and it felt as if he wanted to tell me something important. I watched him walk into the shadows of the trees. Then, I heard rustling behind me. I turned quickly, but nothing was there. A whisper followed. "Stay." My stomach sank, and the chill ran down my spine. I drove away, my heart pounding. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was waiting for me, hidden in the dark layers of the woods. As the nights wore on, my sense of reality started to blur. I questioned myself. Were those meetings real? Or had my mind lost grip while driving through the endless dark? The woods felt alive, eager to consume me. I gripped the wheel tighter, wondering if I'd ever break free from this strange cycle of encounters. Would I be next? That next night, I felt a strange tension building inside me. I couldn't ignore the weight of stories repeated by those hitchhikers. As I drove, I focused on the road, but my mind wandered. I even thought about avoiding that stretch entirely. Yet, something compelled me to go back. Around the bend, I saw a figure waiting in the dark. It was a woman this time, standing next to a large tree. She looked lost and tired, and I felt a rush of sympathy. I pulled over. "Need a ride?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She climbed in quietly, her eyes darting nervously. "Thank you," she murmured. I could sense fear coming off her in waves. We drove in silence for a moment, and the air felt thick, like a storm was brewing. I glanced at her. "You okay?" I asked. "Not really," she replied softly. "I've been hearing things in the woods." My stomach twisted. I nodded, knowing all too well the uncomfortable stories that surrounded this place. "Like what?" I pressed, trying to keep the conversation going. "Voices," she said, eyes wide. "They call my name at night." My pulse quickened. It felt like I was in the middle of a bad horror movie. "What do they say?" "I don't remember," she whispered, staring straight ahead. "But I always feel them, right behind me." I swallowed hard, a chill creeping into my bones. It was as if the very woods were alive, breathing down my neck. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to focus on keeping my voice calm. "I was hiking," she replied, her voice cracking. "But I got lost." Then I heard the voices. I wanted to ask more, but the tension in the car felt unbearable. Suddenly, I noticed the shadows outside shifting. I slammed my brakes when I saw a tall figure standing at the edge of the road, a man wearing the same flannel as one of my earlier passengers. My throat tightened. "What is it?" she gasped. I didn't respond. The man smiled, but it wasn't right. There was a darkness about him. I forced my foot back on the accelerator. "Hold on!" I shouted, speeding past him. Still with my heart racing, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman was looking back too, her fear palpable. "He's still there!" she exclaimed. I didn't want to look, but I had to. When I did, the man was gone. My breath hitched. "Did you see that?" I asked her, trying to gauge if I was losing my mind. "He's gone," she whispered, trembling. "But we shouldn't be here. We need to leave." As I drove faster, I saw more symbols carved into the trees, like warnings I hadn't noticed before. My hands tightened on the wheel. What were they trying to tell me? And then I heard it, a low whisper right by my ear, soft yet urgent. "Stay!" Everything went cold, and I slammed the brakes again. The engine almost stalled. "What was that?" I shouted, panic flooding my voice. The woman pressed her hands over her ears. "No. Drive." But a heavy fog began to roll in, dimming the headlights. The road ahead vanished into a ghostly white. I could barely see where I was going. I was lost in a maze made of shadows and whispers. And that's when I saw it, an outline in the fog, something large and looming just off the road. My heart dropped. What had I just driven into? I gripped the steering wheel, heart pounding. The fog peeled back slightly, revealing the shape ahead, a gigantic totem covered in dark, twisting symbols that seemed to shudder with life. I felt an inexplicable dread wash over me, like the air had thickened with malice. "What is that?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. I didn't know if she wanted an answer or if she wanted me to keep driving. But we were too close now. "It looks like some sort of monument," I stammered, trying to make sense of it. The details were hard to see, but the presence was undeniable. I edged the car forward despite the instinct screaming at me to turn around. As we neared the totem, a low hum echoed through the fog, a sound without a source, wrapping around us like a shroud. I glanced at her. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fixed on the figure. "We shouldn't be here," she whispered, fear thickening her voice. "I know," I replied, but the words felt useless. I hit the brakes, and the car came to a halt a few feet from the ominous monument. It loomed over us now, its carved features twisting in unnatural forms. Shadows danced at its base, flickering and pooling like spilled ink across the forest floor. The humming intensified. I could feel the vibrations in my chest, an unsettling resonance that felt otherworldly. The woman pressed her hands harder against her ears, but I could sense her curiosity battling the terror. "We have to go," I urged, almost pleading. Just then, a low growl echoed from the woods, sending a shaft of ice through my veins. It was deep and guttural, almost human. "What was that?" she gasped, eyes darting around, panic seizing her movements. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, the fog thickened again, swallowing the totem from view and cloaking the car in an oppressive gloom. My senses screamed for escape, but I was frozen in place. Then, without warning, the humming stopped. Silence settled over us, thick and unnatural. I could barely breathe. The intense quiet made every rustle of the leaves outside sound like a roar. "Let us go," I shouted, heart racing. I threw the car into reverse, but my foot slipped. The tires squealed on the wet pavement as I struggled to steer clear from whatever unseen things were lurking around us. In a panic, I shifted into drive and gunned it forward, almost losing control. The headlights flickered and nearly dimmed as I sped away from that haunting monument, the road bumpy and barely visible. Just as relief started to flood my system, I noticed something else. A flicker in the rearview mirror caught my eye. It was him, the man in the flannel, now standing right where the totem had been. He was staring straight at us. "Drive!" the woman yelled, urging me on. But I couldn't shake the dreadful feeling that he wasn't just an illusion. As I accelerated, I could see more figures emerging, shadows that blurred all together, watching from the tree line. I pressed harder on the gas, desperate to get away. But the road twisted and turned, the fog thickening with each curve until it felt like I was driving in circles. Then I saw a fork in the road under the trees, two paths. One seemed to lead deeper into the woods while the other appeared to slope down toward an abyss of darkness. I hesitated. Both choices felt wrong. "Oh no," I heard the woman whisper beside me. "Which way?" I had to decide, but I could feel the pressure mounting behind me. "I don't know," I shouted, anxiety spilling over. Someone was coming, and I couldn't tell if we would escape. I slammed the brakes, the car jolting to a stop. My heart raced as I stared at the two paths ahead. The oppressive fog seemed to swallow everything beyond the immediate glow of our headlights. I could feel her eyes boring into me, pleading for a decision, but all I felt was panic. "Just pick one," she urged, her voice tight with fear. I swallowed hard. They both looked dark and menacing, like jaws waiting to snap shut. I took a deep breath, listening to the soft thud of my heart against my chest. I had to choose. "Let us go left," I said, my voice shaky. "It looks less steep." With a quick turn of the wheel, I pushed the car into gear and drove down the left path. The moment we entered the narrow trail, it felt like the shadows closed in tighter around us. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches reaching like skeletal hands. I could barely see beyond the headlights, the road growing uneven and rocky. "Are we safe?" she asked, her eyes darting around. The anxiety in her voice made me feel even worse. I didn't have an answer. Suddenly, my headlights illuminated something on the side of the road, a figure standing there, illuminated briefly before disappearing back into the gloom. I hit the brakes, skidding to a halt. My stomach churned. "Is that someone?" she whispered, voice trembling. I think I trailed off, but there was no one there now. Just the eerie stillness. The weight of being watched wrapped around us again. "Maybe it's a hitchhiker?" she suggested, wary yet curious. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I replied, swallowing hard. "We shouldn't stop." My gut instinct screamed at me, but as I exchanged glances with her, something shifted. The fog swirled, and I could have sworn I saw a hand wave. It felt wrong and yet almost welcoming. "Please," she pressed. It could be someone lost, just like us. I hesitated. Every logical thought argued against stopping, but my heart didn't seem to care. "Fine," I said, frustration bubbling to the surface. "But if it doesn't feel right, we drive away. No questions." I put the car in park and rolled down the window, peering into the thick mist. "Hey! Do you need help?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No response, just a heavy silence. My skin prickled with unease. I glanced at her, her eyes were wide, filled with a mix of fear and anticipation. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught movement. Not just the stranger but something else. The shadows seemed to ripple, morphing into indistinct forms. I felt it before I saw it, a sense of wrongness that rippled through the air. "Let us go," I shouted, mind racing. I hit the gas, throwing the car into drive again. The figure retreated into the fog, but the shadows didn't dissipate. As I swerved back onto the path, a loud banging echoed against the car, sending adrenaline coursing through my veins. I glanced at the rearview mirror. A face flashed into view, an expression twisted in rage. It was the man in the flannel. "Drive. Drive faster!" she screamed. I floored the accelerator. The tires screamed as I pushed the car to its limits. The road twisted wildly, and the shadows that once held my attention now morphed into streaks of darkness. But then I noticed something ahead, partially obscured in the fog. A clearing. Relief washed over me. Maybe it would lead us out. That's when I saw it. The other side of the clearing. The figures were there, waiting. Waiting for us. The clearing opened up, but it felt like stepping into another layer of fog, one that clung thickly to my lungs. My foot pressed down harder on the accelerator, but the figures loomed closer. I could make out 3 of them, shuffling slowly, almost aimlessly, as if they were part of the mist itself. No faces, just shadows draped in tattered clothes that flapped eerily in the wind. "Keep driving," she shouted, panic rising in her voice. I gripped the steering wheel, fighting the urge to stop and scream. The car lurched as I veered right, narrowly missing a gnarled tree that seemed to reach out for us. The sound of branches scraping against the side filled the air, a harsh reminder of how close we were to disaster. I could feel her breathing beside me, fast and erratic, mirroring my own rising terror. "What are they doing?" she asked, glancing back at the figures. "Why aren't they moving?" "I don't know," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. I focused on the road ahead, where the fog seemed to thicken and twist. "Just hold on." I glanced in the rearview mirror. The figures, now standing still, were watching us. Their heads tilted in unison, their bodies like blackened trees against the pale fog. A chill swept over me, crawling up my spine. Were they real? Or just illusions conjured by the night? "Maybe we should," she started, but the words died in her throat as the headlights flickered. I cursed under my breath, gripping the wheel tighter. The car sputtered, the engine groaning as if it, too, wanted to stop. "Not now!" I shouted, pushing the gas pedal down harder. The rumble beneath us felt weaker by the second, and the shadows appeared to quiver with anticipation, like predators waiting for their prey to falter. And then I saw it, a glint in the fog. A large object laid across the road. I swerved just in time, narrowly avoiding a twisted metal frame like something out of a nightmare, part of a broken fence, bent and jagged. The tires screeched, and I barely regained control. My heart raced. What was happening? I glanced again at the figures. They were closer now, just a few feet from the edge of the road. My instinct screamed at me to keep going, yet an unseen force seemed to pull at me, urging me to look back one last time. But when I did, the shadows had closed in, a wall of darkness. My breath caught in my throat. I turned back toward the road, more relentless now, more frightened. Then everything went dark. The headlights sputtered and died, plunging us into an abyss of blackness. "Are we out of gas?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the engine's dying whir. No. No, I filled up before we left." Panic twisted my stomach. The car coasted to a stop, the only sound was the low hum of silence that enveloped us. "We have to get out," I said, but my voice sounded foreign, edged with the same dread that filled the car. What if the figures were real? What if they weren't just figments of a broken mind? As I reached for the door handle, a whisper floated through the stillness. It wasn't words but a sound, a beckoning. That's when I realized the shadows weren't just outside the car, they were coiling around us, flowing like smoke, drawn in by our fear. "What's happening?" she cried, eyes wide with panic. I was about to answer when I saw it, a pale hand reaching toward the window, fingers curling, desperate and inviting. My breath caught. Then came the knock. Heavy, hollow, and echoing. Someone or something wanted in. I froze. My heart thudded as the knock echoed in the stillness. My hand dropped from the door handle, paralyzed by fear. I couldn't take my eyes off that hand pressed against the glass. It looked skeletal, faintly illuminated by something I couldn't quite see. What was that? She whispered, instinctively inching closer to me. I could feel her warmth, but it did nothing to ease the chill crawling down my spine. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely coming out. I forced my gaze away from the hand, looking out through the fog. The figures had disappeared. It was as if they melted back into the mist. I gulped. We need to get out of here. The words felt heavy on my tongue. The knock came again, more insistent this time. I felt a stirring of something between fear and curiosity. Was it worth opening the door? Don't. She urged, but her voice was trembling, betraying her own uncertainty. What if it's one of them? My mind raced as I thought through the options. If we stayed here, that strange hand could force its way inside. But what if I opened the door and whatever was out there was even worse? Suddenly, a low, raspy voice drifted through the crack of the window. Help me. It wasn't a plea, it felt demanding, almost like an order wrapped in desperation. I hesitated. Could I really trust it? What if no? She interrupted. Just start the car. We have to leave. I glanced around, searching for any signs of life, but the world outside looked like an empty canvas painted in shadows. The fog pressed against the glass, thick as the night. With a deep breath, I tried the ignition. Silence. I looked at the dashboard. The fuel gauge read empty despite my earlier certainty. Despair twisted in my gut as I turned the key again, begging the engine to roar to life, but I was met with only a hollow click. The knocking grew louder, rhythmically pounding like a heartbeat against the window. Help me. The voice echoed louder now, a chorus of whispers layered with the desperate plea. Do it, now. She yelled, her panic creeping into her tone. I knew I had to choose. I had to act. Without thinking, I yanked the door open, heart racing. The fog rushed in, cold and heavy. All my instincts screamed at me to slam the door shut again and flee, but I needed answers. But no one stood there. Only the empty air twisted with fog. And then my eyes caught movement on the road. A shadow flitted past, darting away from me. Close the door. She shouted. But I was frozen again, staring at where the shadow vanished. In that moment, something strange flickered before my eyes, a glimpse of one of those figures, face distorted, eyes glaring back through the fog. Run! I screamed. But when I looked back over my shoulder, it was gone, leaving only a whisper of air that smelled like decay. The shadows began to swirl around the car again, tightening their grip. Now! She screamed, her voice urgent, breaking through my haze. I jumped back into the car, slamming the door as I frantically twisted the key again. This time, the engine sputtered, coughed, and roared to life. A surge of hope fought against the terror gripping me. We need to move. Now! I yelled, my heart racing as I slammed the car into gear. The shadows surrounded us, and I pressed the gas pedal down hard, navigating through the thick fog. Just before we tore through the mist, I heard it again, the whisper, now a cacophony. You shouldn't have opened the door. And I knew then, whatever we had let in wasn't just outside, it had seeped into us too. As I drove into the night, the shadows lingered, promising we wouldn't escape that easily. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, heart racing. I had to focus. The road ahead was a blur of darkness and fog, but somehow I kept pushing forward, desperate to put distance between us and whatever terror had confronted us. That was insane, she said, her voice trembling. I could feel her trying to calm herself. What do you think that was? Were those people? I don't know, I replied, glancing at her. I don't want to think about it. But thoughts swirl in my mind. Memories flooded back, ghost stories told around campfires, warnings from strangers. All those tales about things that stalk the dark. Drive faster, she urged, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror. We're not safe yet. Right, I muttered, pressing harder on the pedal. The engine growled in response, yet the vibrations felt oddly muted, as if the fog was swallowing the sound whole. I could barely see the edges of the road, and each time we hit a pothole, my stomach dropped. Minutes felt like hours, but then we hit a clearing. The fog lifted just enough for me to breathe, revealing faint outlines of trees lining the road. I let out a shaky breath, thinking maybe we were out of danger. But the moment was deceiving. Ahead, I spotted something by the side of the road. I squinted, confusion flooding my mind. A figure stood there, one hand waving, the other clutching their arm. My heart leaped. Who would be out here in the middle of nowhere? What if it's one of them? She asked, voice thin with fear. I don't know, I admitted. My gut churned, but I slowed down, the weight of curiosity pulling me in. As we approached, I could see the features of a man. His clothes were tattered, face smudged with dirt. He looked disoriented, almost like he'd stumbled off a movie set. Help me, he rasped, voice cracking. I hesitated, ready to dismiss him, but he locked eyes with me. There was something in his gaze. Desperation mixed with a sinister edge that sent a chill through me. My instincts screamed that he wasn't right. Go! She shouted, but I couldn't. I felt trapped between pity and fear. But before I could respond, he lunged toward the car, slamming his hands against the window. Please! Help! They're coming! His breath fogged the glass, and I could see madness in his eyes. Without thinking, I stepped on the gas. The tires screeched as we surged forward, the figure blurring into the mist behind us. The chaos in the car faded into a stunned silence. I glanced at her, expecting to see fear, but all I found was confusion. What just happened? Then everything went dark. The headlights flickered and died, the engine sputtered, gasping like it was choking. We were coasting now, and I slammed my foot down, panic rising. It was as if the night had swallowed us whole. Why aren't we moving? She yelled, gripping my arm. And when I saw it, the outline of a car in the distance, parked at an odd angle across the road. A flash of reflection from its broken mirror caught my eye. My heart dropped. Someone's here, I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. Let us get out of here. She urged, but I was already putting my foot on the brake. The car rolled to a stop, and I turned off the ignition. The night held its breath, waiting. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been chasing us was still lurking, just out of sight. And as I turned to open the door, I caught a flicker of movement in the fog. I needed to decide what to do next, but one thing was clear, we weren't alone anymore. I opened the door, the cool air blasting my face. The fog wrapped around us, thick and heavy. I glanced back at her, searching for reassurance, but doubt flickered in her eyes. Stay close, I said, stepping out. My heart thudded in my chest, echoing in the eerie silence. The shadows seemed to crawl, shifting as I took a few hesitant steps away from the car. Do we really have to? She whispered, looking around as if expecting something to leap from the darkness. I didn't have an answer. Something about the abandoned vehicle ahead felt wrong. The way it was angled, half on the road, half off, set my nerves on edge. I moved cautiously toward it. The fog swirled thicker here, wrapping around my legs like a living thing. Can you see anyone? She asked, voice tense. Not yet, I replied, straining my eyes. The outline of the car was starting to take shape. It was old, the paint peeling and flaking. A rusty door hung open, a stark invitation to investigate. Maybe we should just get back in and no, I interrupted. I had to know. What if they need help? She let out a shaky breath but didn't argue further. I approached the car, each step crunching through gravel and leaves. I peered inside, and my stomach twisted. The interior was empty, save for scattered belongings, a backpack, a flashlight, and something that looked like a journal lying half open. The pages fluttered in the light wind, revealing hasty scribbles that made no sense. Names, places, drawings of strange symbols. A chill ran down my spine. Look, I called back to her, pointing at the journal. This doesn't seem right. What happened to the driver? Maybe they're just lost, she said, glancing around, still watching the shadows. But something inside me knew it was more than that. My gut tightened as I considered the possibility that the figure from earlier may not be the only troubled soul out here. Suddenly, I heard a sound scraping, like something being dragged across the pavement. My heart stopped. I turned, scanning the fog for the source, breath quickening. Did you hear that? I asked, now gripping the edge of the car. Yeah, she said, her eyes wide, darting left and right. Let us go back, please. But before I could move, a figure emerged from the fog. Not the man from before, but a woman with wild hair sticking out like she had just woken from a nightmare. She staggered toward us, eyes glazed and frantic. Help! Please! She screamed, collapsing onto the ground as if the weight of the world had just crashed on her. They're coming. Fear washed over me, crawling under my skin. Who was she? How many more were out here? I glanced back at the car, feeling trapped between two terrifying realities. In an instant, the shadows deepened, and I knew we had to make a choice. Stay and risk whatever was lurking in the fog, or retreat and hope we could escape whatever nightmare was unfolding. That's when I saw it movement behind the trees, shapes shifting, gliding through the mist. A new wave of panic surged within me. We weren't just facing uncertainty, we were in the grip of something far worse. Run! I shouted, but the fog seemed to close in as I turned, the darkness swallowing our screams. I sprinted back toward the car, pulling her along with me. The woman's plea echoed in my ears, but I couldn't dwell on it. Shadows shifted wildly behind us, and I felt more than saw them drawing closer. Where do we go? She gasped, fear lacing her voice. Just anywhere but here. I shouted. I threw the car door open but hesitated to look back again. I couldn't afford to focus on the fog and whatever was lurking within it. My instincts screamed danger, urging me to move fast. I jumped into the driver's seat, fumbling for the keys. My hands shook. Lock the doors, I said, my voice strained. She quickly slid into the passenger seat, her eyes darting around like a wild animal cornered. I found the ignition, turned it nothing. Come on. I cursed, pounding the steering wheel. The engine sputtered but stayed silent. She grabbed my arm, drawing my attention back to the fog. I saw movement again, clearer this time, a figure emerging, tall and thin, almost skeletal. My breath caught in my throat. Start it. She urged, desperation painted across her face. I twisted the key again, and this time the engine roared to life, rattling like an old beast. I slammed the gear into reverse and peeled backward, gravel flying, and the figure vanished back into the mist. My heart raced as I swung the wheel and hit the gas, racing down the road. The headlights barely pierced the fog, revealing only the faint outline of trees standing like sentinels on either side. What was that? She asked, breathless. I don't know, I replied, feeling the weight of her gaze on me. But we need to find a place to go. I scanned the trees, looking for a sign. The road opened up ahead, leading to a fork. One path seemed to spiral deeper into the woods, while the other looked like it led to more open space. Left or right? I asked. Left? she suggested, uncertainty in her tone. Fine. I veered left, my decision fueled by unsettling intuition. We drove deeper, the fog thickening around us. Silence enveloped the car again, and I felt the oppressive weight of the night creeping back in. Then something caught my eye. A familiar shape painted in white. The abandoned car. It wasn't just a random stopping point, it was a point of return. Forcing us back into the grip of whatever was out there. There. I pointed, panic rising. It leads back to that car. As I shared my realization, the harsh lights of the fog swiftly illuminated something moving at the edge of the trees. My heart dropped. A small group of figures with wild, chaotic movements burst forth, impossible to count in the thick mist. Go! She screamed, and I pressed the accelerator, narrowly avoiding the first figure stumbling into the road. I glanced at her, but her face was pale, the reality settling in. They were in the car, she whispered, fear gripping her voice. They were watching. That's when I saw it, a brief flicker of light in the rearview mirror, something too bright against the gloom. I turned back to the road, and my stomach dropped. The way ahead twisted into darkness, and the gnawing sense of dread promised we'd encountered something more than human. Get ready! I yelled, just as headlights cut through the fog behind us. A vehicle was coming fast and ominous, bearing down without warning. I couldn't escape what was chasing us. Not if it was relentless. I had no clue what lay ahead. All I could do was drive into that darkness and hope it wasn't worse than what was coming up behind us. I pressed down on the accelerator, willing the car to go faster. The engine roared, but I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on us from all sides. The figures now hung at the edge of my vision, darting amongst the trees, their movements erratic yet purposeful. The mere thought of them closing in sent chills racing through me. Keep going! She shouted, her grip tightening on the dashboard. Outside the window, shadows danced as I navigated the twisted road. I glanced into the rearview mirror. Those headlights were still behind us, unwavering, like a predator stalking its prey. I veered sharply around a bend, and suddenly the headlights flickered behind us, then vanished. My heart raced, half hope, half dread. Did you see that? They went away? I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. I don't know. Just keep going. She urged, her eyes wide. But the brief moment of relief faded as I realized it felt too quiet. I turned to look ahead when the fog rolled back in thicker, obscuring my vision again. I squinted, trying to pierce the endless white. Just beyond that dull expanse, I saw a brief flash of something dark, the outline of a massive tree looming directly in our path. Watch out! She screamed. I yanked the wheel left, barely avoiding a collision. Fear coursed through me like wildfire as I fought to keep control. The car skittered dangerously close to the forest's edge. Where do we go? I shouted, alarm thrumming in my chest. I could feel the anxiety radiating off her. We need to find a road and exit. The fog lifted like a veil, revealing a stretch of open road ahead that shimmered faintly. It felt strange, not quite real. There. Let us go that way. I pointed. It felt like our only chance to escape. Without hesitation, I angled the car forward, my foot pressing down hard on the gas. The horizon tore open, showing a flickering light ahead, far in the distance. The headlights swallowed the darkness around us, illuminating the road for whatever lay that way. I glanced back in the mirror just as red eyes blinked into view from the trees, figurative claws of the shadows clawing their way after us. Panic clawed at my throat, stifling any breath of possibility. They're coming! She gasped, and I pushed forward harder, the engine whining in protest. Ahead, the light became clearer, brightening like a beacon. Would it be our salvation or another trap? But as we barreled ahead, the light flickered, casting ominous shadows that danced wildly on the asphalt. I squinted, confusion clouding my thoughts. Just then, it dawned on me the light wasn't a chance for escape. It looked almost familiar. Wait. Before I could finish, the car jolted. The tires skidded and slipped on an unseen patch of something slick, sending us into a spin. It felt like time stopped. Hold on. I shouted, bracing for impact. The world outside spun wildly, the brightness suddenly snuffed out. The next thing I knew, the car came to a halt, jarring us both forward, our bodies colliding against the seatbelts. I blinked, disoriented, the fog now eerily quiet. I turned to her, panting. "Are you okay?" I could see the fear etched in her face, but there was something else flickering in her eyes, something like anticipation. "I think." She started, her voice shaky but strangely hopeful, "I think we're back at the fork." I turned to look again. We had returned to where the road split, just beyond the clearing. My heart sank. But how? Around us, the shadows lingered, thicker now, and everything felt too still, too waiting. The engine thrummed softly beneath our hands. I don't know how," she whispered, eyes glued to the road ahead. "But we can't stay here." I rubbed my temples, realizing something chilling. We were in a loop. It's like we're stuck. Before I could ponder further, soft murmurs slipped through the window, lingering on the air. "Help us, join us," they crackled like static, echoing. "Turn it off." I snapped, the fear of the shadows clawing at my resolve. "They're trying to lure us out." My heart raced as I shifted the car into gear. I had to choose again. Left. Or right? I glanced once more at the trees, their looming shapes twisting in my peripheral vision. I could hear soft whispers, coiling around the car, tugging at the very fabric of my thoughts. "Which way?" she asked, the urgency returning to her voice. "Right," I said, my voice more certain than I felt. "Let us go." An audible tension hung in the air as I turned the wheel, and we sped down the right path, leaving the clearing behind. The fog had lifted slightly, but it felt like that thin veil still concealed horrors just out of reach. "What if they follow us?" she asked, looking back into the shadows. "Then we outrun them," I replied, steeling my resolve. But before I could finish my thought, another figure leaped onto the road, a wild-eyed man wearing a tattered shirt, waving frantically. "Help me." I slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop. "What is it with these people?" I shouted, my heart pounding. She had her hands pressed against her head as if to block out the noise. "Don't open the door." I won tea. But what if? My mind reeled. "Just go. Drive," she urged, but something urged me to stay, to understand the tide of confusion threatening to drown us. And yet, as I gripped the steering wheel, I could feel the subtle switch-hungry shadows began to flicker at the edges of the fog. "Please, don't leave me," the man shouted, his expression wild with desperation. In that moment, I felt the inexplicable pull of the night around us. I could almost hear their longing, and mixed with it my own. I turned away, desperation rushing through my veins. "Keep driving. We can't stay here." A sharp whisper surged around us, "Stay." I slammed the pedal down. The car lurched forward, zooping away from the malevolence that loomed so near. Behind us, the figure shrank back, merging momentarily with the shadows. As we sped into the unknown, a twisted thought coiled around my mind. Were we truly escaping, or simply trading one darkness for another? I gripped the wheel tighter. I had no answers, not for myself, and not for her. But the fog behind thickened, and a knowledge settled deep within me: whatever had whispered for companionship was never truly gone. It lingered still, a haunting specter trailing right at my back. I drove faster, desperately hoping that somehow this road would lead us away from that weight. Because I could feel it, the darkness had not disappeared, and I could never be sure I'd evaded their watchful gaze. Only time would tell if freedom was just an illusion, a momentary respite from cruel whispers that echoed in the depths of the night.